Malcontent News is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with three key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events, live, as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent. Good evening, Malcontents. How are you? My name is David. I am the Malcontent, and welcome to an episode of Malcontentment Happy Hour. Today is Wednesday, March 24th, 2021, and we are so glad that you are joining us tonight. One of the first things I want to let you know before we actually start on today's show, we are going to be moving to a new format of doing 3 shows a week. And we are deciding on when we will be introducing our 3rd show a week. Tonight, we've moved Happy Hour to Wednesday because we will be live streaming tomorrow from Seattle for the 300th day of continuous protest march. And so that is why we are doing Happy Hour tonight. Let me pull in my wonderful co-host, Jennifer Smith. Jennifer, how are you doing this evening?
I'm good, David. How are you?
I am really good. It has been an amazing start to this week, and it's going to be an amazing night tonight. We have some amazing content. I'm using amazing a lot.
Yes, we do. You have used amazing a lot. Should hit a thesaurus, look up some alternate words.
I need to work on the thesaurus while thinking on my feet here. Jennifer, I think what we'll go ahead and do is jump into the land acknowledgement, and we'll get started.
Okay. Malcontent News comes to you from Seattle, Washington, the occupied homelands of Coast Salish peoples. We are grateful to live and work as guests on these lands, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Duwamish, Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. This land acknowledgement is but one small gesture in the ongoing process of working toward repairing and sustaining relations with Coast Salish lands, waters, peoples, and their other than human kin.
Thank you so much for that, Jennifer. I really like that you've introduced that to the show. Also, the other thing I would like to say, this is the time to go ahead and do those shares, do those retweets if you're on Periscope or Twitter, or if you're watching us on Twitch or YouTube, this is the time to go. Great content right here. This has been a culmination of 1 year of very hard work for the entire team for what we're bringing. The next thing you could do is you could spam those hearts. Let those mods and admins know that you really appreciate all of the hard work that they're doing for you, because the job is very hard and very thankless, and they are paid in hearts at the end of the day. The other thing you do is you go ahead and do likes. If you do hearts and likes, it messes with the algorithm on Facebook, Twitter, and Periscope. If you're watching on Twitch and your YouTube, you're going, I can't spam hearts. Then you could just do a long line of hearts, or even use some of those emotes that we have by becoming a subscriber over on Twitch. Jennifer, before we get started, couple of news stories I just want to touch on. King County Sheriff Department settled with Tommy Lee's family today for $5 million, avoiding a civil rights hearing in that particular case. Tommy Lee was shot and killed by King County deputies who claimed he had a knife. Knife turned out to be a pen. And then continuing questions about the quality of the investigation and whether even had a pen emerged. And King 5 in particular has really been doing good coverage on the Tommy Lee story.
Yeah, no, I saw that today and I didn't have a chance because I was looking at other things to really go through and read a lot of the articles very carefully. But I did see that there was an announcement made today that they did indeed settle with the family.
The other news that came out of Washington, D.C. is Dr. Levine has become the first openly trans individual to receive a federal role through Senate confirmation today. They basically stopped the vote when she cleared at 52, and 2 Republicans crossed the lines and gave her a yes vote.
Yeah, no, I thought that was great news. That was another thing I was able to kind of glance at briefly when I was looking at other stuff for the show today. But yeah, really, that's a good moment, a historic moment.
It really is. And I'm going to say it one more time. This is the time to go ahead and start doing those shares, watch parties, and retweets, because we know what you all are here for. You're here for Dr. Anthony Fauci. And Jennifer, I think we're going to go ahead and get started.
I was kind of hoping they were here for us, but he's pretty cool too.
By the time we get to 2030, we will have ended HIV as an epidemic.
I'm Mike Montgomery, and I am the editor-in-chief and publisher of United Seattle Magazine. It has been quite a year for us. We've had lots of notables on our cover, including Congresswoman Mullah Jalapal, Governor Jay Inslee, and now Dr. Anthony Fauci. We are excited to offer you the exclusive interview with Dr. Anthony Fauci.
So originally I talked to Dr. Fauci in 2007 at the AIDS vaccine conference. Well, I got connected with Unite Seattle Magazine because my good friend George had passed away in June. I was introduced to Mike, who's the publisher of United Seattle Magazine. I had mentioned to him that I actually did an interview with Dr. Fauci back in 2007, and I provided him with the link. But it actually was MK, Michael, who had the connection. So once he heard that I had done the interview with Dr. Fauci, he asked if I'd be interested in doing it again, that he knew someone who could make that connection happen. And of course, with Dr. Fauci being sort of the person of the moment, the person that we rely upon to bring this pandemic to an end, probably one of the most important people in the world at the moment, I felt absolutely thrilled with the idea of speaking with him again. And with all that, here's the interview with Dr. Anthony Fauci. I want to thank you again for doing this interview. I know that you're a very busy person these days.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Happy to do it.
I think I speak for the vast majority of our readers when I say that we appreciate your candor and reassuring presence during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. As you know, we in Seattle have been acutely touched by COVID-19, especially during those early days of the pandemic. I often tell people that you appear to be the same person in a figurative way that I met high atop the Sheraton Hotel and Towers in 2007, as you were in town for the AIDS vaccine conference. I was wondering, how has your life changed in personal and professional ways since becoming a household name?
Well, there's the good and the bad about that. It's been a most unusual year, somewhat surrealistic in that the enormity of the problem and the acuteness of the problem, which is really in many respects different than HIV/AIDS, which the importance and impact of HIV/AIDS is stretched over decades. And it was something that started off insidiously, and there were a few of us in the early years of the 80s that got involved. And then as it became clear we were dealing with a global pandemic, it was the gradual appreciation of the globality of the outbreak, a lot of science, a lot of investment, but it was over many, many years. This has been completely explosive, where you have literally 500,000 people in the United States dying in, a year's period of time. And it's completely transformed what I do, because I've had to be involved in it from a scientific and from a policy standpoint, that it's been, in many respects, almost a surrealistic year of working literally every day. I have not had a day off in over a year, but it's important, and I hang in there and have the energy to do it because of the enormity of the problem and the acuteness of the problem. A lot of strange things have happened. I've gotten caught in something that's quite different than what we went through with HIV, where we had activists who were confrontative, they were theatrical, they were iconoclastic, but what they were trying to say was very important, and they wanted to gain our attention, my attention. They did gain my attention, and when I listened to them, which is one of the best things I've done, it became clear that what they were saying made absolutely good sense, and that the federal government needed to change the paradigm of how we interacted with the activist community, how we interacted with the entire LGBTQ community, because we were dealing with a very unusual disease that was evolving before our eyes. And the ultimate end game was, despite the early confrontation, the end result was a very positive thing. We embraced the community. The community was value added. They made contributions, and the AIDS effort was far better off as a result of the initial confrontation, which jolted us into a really enduring relationship with the community and the constituents. That's really different from what's going on right now, because what's going on right now is we're trying to address an outbreak in the context of a very severe divisiveness in society, so that the confrontation is confrontation against the principles of public health, where wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, or being in a crowded situation or not being in a crowded situation, has become sort of a political statement of where you are in your ideology, which is really unfortunate, because, as you well know, when you are dealing with a disease doesn't know. We used to say this back in the early years of HIV, it's the virus that's the enemy. It's not the people. And in this situation, we try to get people to appreciate that it's the virus that is the enemy. And the only way we're going to effectively address it is by pulling together in a unified way. And unfortunately, that's not been the case. So how that's affected me is that since I've stood up for the truth, science, evidence-based and data-based approaches towards everything, I have been, on the one hand, praised and idolized by many, and on the other hand, scorned by others who took a more political outlook at what I'm doing and don't like the idea that I'm talking about the public health principles that we need to live by if we really want to get this outbreak under the control. So it's a little bit of a schizophrenic thing, half of the people love me and half of the people hate me, which is something that I did not have to go through with HIV. With HIV, there was trying to gain attention. And when once attention was gained, it was a very good cooperation, collaboration, and synergy between the activist group and the scientists and the regulators.
I remember Larry Kramer, an early HIV/AIDS activist, said about you originally, before he met you, that you were an idiot, and then later he called you a hero when it comes to efforts to combat HIV/AIDS in the early days of the epidemic. What would you say, though, to that person who's living with HIV/AIDS, who sees this robust response to COVID-19, how quickly these vaccines have been developed, manufactured, and deployed, and wonder why a similar effort wasn't made in those early days of the epidemic.
That is a question. That's a good question, but that it is not infrequently subject to understandable misunderstanding. And that is that getting a vaccine against HIV is quite problematic, because the fact is that the body does not make a very adequate immune response against the virus. And one of the principles of developing vaccines in the field of vaccinology is to mimic natural infection, because when you have diseases like smallpox and polio and measles, even though they cause a considerable degree of morbidity and mortality, at the end of the day, the body very, very adequately handles those viruses, eliminates them from the body, and leaves you with enduring immunity against reinfection with the same virus. So when vaccinologists like myself and my colleagues back in 1983, 4, 5, when we started working on a vaccine, we put a lot of effort, but the body did not give us that proof of concept, because the body does not handle HIV very well. So what we have to do, and we've invested literally billions of dollars in research trying to develop a vaccine which does better than what the natural response to the virus is. Whereas with COVID-19, even though it's caused a lot of sickness and death, in the majority of people, the body's immune system handles it extremely well, eliminates it, and most of the people, at least 30, not most, but at least 30 to 40% of the people who get infected with SARS-CoV-2, they don't have any symptoms at all. Yet their body's immune system eliminates the virus. So all we had to do with COVID-19 was develop a methodology where you expose the body to the very important spike protein, which is the protein that binds to the cells in the upper and lower respiratory tract, and induce a good immune response. And then all of a sudden, bingo, you got a highly effective vaccine to the point of 94 to 95%. That's the reason why there's a difference, not because of lack of trying. It's in the inherent inability of the body to mount a truly adequate immune response against HIV, as opposed to the ease with which the body mounts a good response most of the time against SARS-CoV-2.
Now, in 1981, you began looking into the virus. 3 years later, you were the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. How could we have stopped the spread of the HIV/AIDS virus in those early years, and what kept us from sort of containing it?
The thing that caused the spread, apart from situations where injection drug using, which is a disease, get it away from being a crime, it's a disease addiction. But if you look at the modality whereby this virus was spread, not only in the United States, which was predominantly, not exclusively, but predominantly a disease or an infection of gay men, whereas internationally, such as in Southern Africa, it was predominantly a heterosexual disease, that we did not have a vaccine. And early on, we didn't have treatment, despite the fact that we have spectacularly effective treatment now, due to a lot of effort that was put in with resources and scientific commitment. The fact is that the disease is spread by a very natural function, namely sexual activity. And that's one of the really complicating issues of that, is that many people are practicing risk behavior, did not even know they were practicing risk behavior. And then that seeded an outbreak, which then spread really very, very robustly throughout the gay community, and then internationally, particularly in countries such as Southern Africa, where the conditions there, are amenable to that type of a spread. So I'm not so sure what could have been done. Maybe early on, if the Reagan administration had sounded the alarm, whether or not the gay community would have listened to that, it's still unclear. We'll never know because it never happened. But I guess one of the things that could have been done back then would have been to use the bully pulpit of the presidency to get out there and warn people about the danger of this sexually transmitted disease.
Now, we won't get our own Operation Warp Speed, but what will it take to end HIV/AIDS in the United States?
We put together that plan in 2019 that really got rolling in 2020 to end the epidemic in 10 years in the United States by implementing the tools that we have, by doing things like better and more extensive utilization of PrEP, including the more easily usable injection, long-acting cabotegravir, to get as many people under treatment as possible, to allow treatment as prevention to occur, namely undetectable equals untransmissible. That's an important area. And then finally, to get a moderately effective vaccine. I believe if we do all of those things in a very proactive way over the next 10 years, we can decrease the new infections by 75% in 5 years and by 90+% in 10 years. So I still hold the hope and the anticipation is that by the time we get to 2030, we will have ended HIV as an epidemic, ended as we know it. I don't think we're going to eliminate it, and I don't think we're going to eradicate it, at least not in the very foreseeable future. But I think we can end it as a true threatening epidemic in this country by 2030 if we continue to get people into treatment programs, to get as many people utilizing one form or another of PrEP, and hopefully with a at least moderately successful vaccine.
Julia Braithman at the Boston University, she's in the School of Health, has said that while it's unclear COVID-19 poses additional risks for people living with HIV, it is clear that COVID-19 has disrupted the health system, making it more difficult, more challenging for people living with chronic conditions like HIV. Also, people, having a hard time getting their PrEP. There's disruptions for transgender people and, having to postpone their surgeries and experiencing interruptions in hormone therapies. So what role can the federal government play to ensure that these disruptions are minimized?
That is a good question. I'm not sure the federal government can do much, but perhaps with some subsidizing the state's capability of making sure that the flow of drugs and the availability of testing and a number of the programs of implementation science continue with substantial support. So if you're talking about where the federal government plays a role here, one of the things would be to continue the support for HIV/AIDS for the NIH, for the CDC, and for HRSA, because if you look at the plan, which I described in a paper that I wrote with my colleagues in 2019 in the Journal of the American Medical Association, we described all the things that we need, particularly implementation science. And it involved multiple agencies, not only NIH, but the CDC, the ASPR, the Assistant Secretary for Prevention and Response, HRSA, SAMHSA, a variety of agencies, all of which need to cooperate, collaborate, and synergize in trying to end the epidemic. So that's what I believe the federal government can do, continue support of these agencies that are essentially the implementers of the ending of the HIV/AIDS epidemic.
What role can the federal government play to look at issues like Truvada and how maybe these antivirals can reduce the severity of COVID-19? Or is there no relation between taking these antiretroviral drugs and the control of the virus?
We've been studying what impact COVID-19 could possibly have on HIV besides the interruption of the services that you appropriately and accurately mentioned several minutes ago, is that if HIV-infected individuals have some of the underlying comorbidities which make them prone to have a more serious outcome were they to get infected. And I refer specifically to the premature aging, because, you know, the older you are, the more likely it is that you're going to get a severe outcome. And you know that persons living with HIV have metabolic issues that make it appear, if not in reality, that they are aging a bit more quickly. The chronic renal disease, the fact that HIV-infected individuals have more hypertension, heart disease, liver disease, those underlying conditions that when people did analyses of this, they found it wasn't HIV in and of itself, but it was the comorbidities associated with HIV. Now, if you have HIV that's out of control and you're immunosuppressed with a CD4 count of 10 and a viral load of 700,000 to 1 million, obviously you fall under the category of being immune deficient, which is one of the risks of advanced disease. But even a person who's got a CD4 count of 600, 650, 700 is on antiretroviral drug with an undetectable viral load. If that person had been infected for a considerable period of time, particularly if they didn't get onto drugs early on, they could have some of the morbidities that would make it more likely that not that they would get infected, but that they would get a serious outcome.
Should the United States and the states in particular who control the distribution of the COVID-19 vaccines make people living with HIV a priority for the vaccine, or should the vaccine be targeted in communities with a higher level of HIV infection?
It becomes a slippery slope when you designate people by a particular race, a particular ethnicity, or a particular subcategory. I think HIV-infected individuals fall within the category of underlying comorbidities. That is for sure. It's definitely recommended. So as soon as the priority opens up for people from 16 to 64, which is where most of the HIV, people living with HIV fall into, that is a priority for vaccination in level 1C. And some jurisdictions are already at 1C, and many will soon be at 1C. So I think that prioritization is coming soon.
As someone who has advised multiple presidents and sort of seen in your own history how the LGBT community felt ignored, what are the public health implications of this overt hostility, the implications of these hostile administrations and these policies towards the LGBT community?
It's very natural, Renee. I mean, when you have hostility towards anyone, it is detrimental to everything about that relationship, including the health of the person. We are right now in a different era. It's become very clear that President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris feel that there should be equity in every respect to all people, regardless of their age, their sex, their sexual orientation. I mean, in any aspect, there should be equity. And he feels very strongly about that. So I think you're going to see the fruits of that in the coming years.
For Disease Control and Prevention admitted earlier this month in a report that because of longstanding social inequities and higher prevalence of severe underlying health conditions, sexual minority populations might be vulnerable to COVID-19 acquisition and associated severe outcomes. But also admit that because data on sexual orientation are not collected in existing COVID-19 data systems, the effect of COVID-19 on sexual minority populations is unknown. How can we address the concerns of the LGBT community if we don't know the extent of the problem or the areas of concern?
We had a discussion like that with the CDC. They gave some reasons why sexual orientation has not been used. And I think it's almost as if people don't want to put it down. That's one of the real problems. But I think that may be an inadequate answer. So hopefully we can get an answer for you.
What would be your recommendation to someone whose partner is refusing to get the vaccine?
I think you need to just explain to them how the procedure that went into showing its safety and efficacy, thousands and tens of thousands of people in the trial, the decision about safety and efficacy made by an independent and transparent process, and the fact that so many of us confident in the safety and efficacy have gotten vaccinated publicly, including me and including the president and the vice president of the United States. So that's a good reason, I think.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
You have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Hi, Malcontents. I'm David, the Malcontent, and I'd like to talk to you for a moment about supporting independent media. When you support us, you help us bring the before, during, and after. You help us defend the First Amendment. You help us amplify BIPOC and LGBTQIA voices, and you help us hold leaderships at a local, state, and federal level accountable. None of this would be possible without support by viewers just like you. When you become a patron for as little as $5 a month, you help buy technology, safety equipment, and help cover travel expenses so that we can continue to bring you news that you trust. If you can't become a patron, you can do a one-time donation on Venmo, and your dollars will go to the exact same causes. With your continued support, we can continue to amplify BIPOC and LGBTQIA voices while showing the truth on what is happening in the world around us. Once again, thank you. And once again, thank you to all of the malcontents who have joined us tonight for this very special interview. And a huge shout out to our field producer, Renee Rackety, who just crushed it tonight. And Jennifer, before I've pulled you in on screen, but before we start chatting, I just want to say, if you enjoyed that interview was possible in part because of our patrons and the people that support us through Venmo. If you like independent journalism, if you want to continue to see us raise the bar for as little as $5 a month, you can help us do just that. And your money is going to very, very good use. It is making things like we just had tonight possible. And Jennifer knows, because I know Jennifer is working on some interviews, we have more stuff in the pipeline. Maybe not Anthony Fauci grade, but we have more stuff in the pipeline in the next coming weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Exciting stuff coming up. Again, not quite as high profile as this, and this was an absolutely wonderful interview. Renee absolutely just killed that interview. Killed it. So, yeah, very exciting stuff. Interesting things to unpack, and a really great and engaging conversation.
You know, one of the things that, three things that jumped out at me, and then I say maybe if you have your three things. The three things jumped out at me. Number one, ton in the comments of people saying that they had lost family members in the earlier days of AIDS. I really appreciated those comments because I lost a cousin in the very early days of the AIDS, in the late 1980s. And his family was very conservative. I remember my Aunt Irene and her husband, and they were this model of conservative white America. And when I say conservative white America, I think in 2021 that just creates such a negative image in people's house, or in people's minds. What I mean by that is Aunt Irene was basically stay at home and all, just the classic family, right? And they handled it, Jennifer, with such grace, and such understanding for something that was very, very difficult for them to understand. So that's number one. Number two, Dr. Fauci's comment on the opioid epidemic and the epidemic that is tied to that on heroin and other drugs that people switch over to when they can no longer afford to buy the opioids. And his very strong comment that should not be treated as a criminal issue. And then the third thing that jumped out at me, his prediction that if we really buckle down, we can, within all reasonable expectations, essentially beat AIDS within the next 9 years.
Yeah. And those are all great things. And one of our things are the same. I too was really struck by that comment that addiction should be considered, a disease and treated as such. But also acknowledging the fact that AIDS in its own right is a pandemic, and it's not just for so long, especially in the United States, it's been associated with predominantly gay men, and it has this very specific stigma attached to it. But it's also, if you look at other countries, especially Africa, it's something that affects predominantly women of childbearing age, so much so that drug manufacturers have actually gone over there and tested on women of this particular demographic. And also, I really liked his conversation about why it's so difficult to create a vaccine for HIV and AIDS versus, what they're encountering with the COVID vaccine.
Yeah, it just very interesting, right, in tying all of that together. And he does it in such a way. He is explaining these issues, these concepts that his brain is like the size of a planet, but he explains it in a way that a common person can follow along and understand and go, okay, I get it, if you're willing to listen to what he has to say.
Yeah, and let's give a shout out too to Renee for, her very pointed questions, very articulate conversation that she engaged him in, because that was if you're going to aspire to do an in-person interview with someone, you should want it to look just like that.
Completely agree. The work that Renee did was amazing, and I would be in error if I would not to point out United Seattle Magazine is available in area stores. I know QFC is one of the stores that is available, and their article that is based in part on that interview that we just aired will be hitting the shelves next week. So be sure to look for United Seattle Magazine if you want to read even more than what we covered here today. And with that, Jennifer, I think we can move on to the next part of our show.
Okay.
We have not done a COVID update in quite a while. We've had COVID stories, but we haven't done a dedicated segment on COVID. And what we felt was appropriate, seeing how we talked to Dr. Anthony Fauci earlier tonight, is that we would highlight COVID as the topic for our entire show. Don't worry, we will be back to the issues of BIPOC tomorrow when we live stream the 300-day of continuous protest march happening in Seattle, Washington. Organizers say 6 o'clock. We always say things start at protester time. That's a big joke here on the West Coast. You could almost say it starts on Hawaii time. People west of us will understand what that means. So don't count on us being on the air exactly at 6 o'clock, but if I were to bet, Jennifer, 6:45, 7 o'clock will probably be rolling.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
So, Jennifer, I know we have a number of stories that are prepared. I believe you have story number one. Why don't we go ahead and get started?
Yeah. So in a recent study that just came out, 25 to 30% of people have said that they will not travel, eat in restaurants or attend gatherings and functions until we've reached herd immunity, which is about 70% of the population receiving both sets of vaccinations. So this was originally published by USA Today, and they're expecting a significant historical bounce back economically post-COVID. But these 25 to 30% of people that are, basically saying, hey, we want to stay quarantined and at home and safe until we go out and, engage more and we've reached herd immunity, could actually damper how quickly the economy bounces back. Numbers have dipped in the last few weeks relative to those who initially said they'd be comfortable dining indoors or traveling on a plane. But the increase in vaccinations and the vaccine more broadly has really been a game changer. And as of right now, only 10% of the country, however, has received the vaccination, either one or both. And so that means those hesitant to engage in activities that might boost the economy will likely be remaining at home for a while longer until we actually establish that herd immunity.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me, Jennifer, when I read that story that 25 to 30% of people are like, I'm still not going to get on a plane or a cruise ship or go to a restaurant until there is full-on herd immunity. So yeah. Almost a third of the country is saying, until we get this fully under control, I'm still on the sidelines.
Yeah, and the big thing is, economists are predicting that those 25 to 30% of people could have a big impact on the economic bounce back that they're expecting as we start to move away from the COVID pandemic.
Yeah, and a number of states are reporting, right, including Washington State, that bounce back is already happening, and that projections for tax revenue at a state level is accelerating much faster than what many states expected.
Yeah, and we'll just have to kind of keep an eye on that, and depending, if we're going to talk a little bit more about the national rates of COVID and what they look like in Washington State and a few other things, and so we're really going to have to keep an eye on that to see if it keeps progressing that way.
And I know we'll be talking about some of those COVID numbers, both nationally and locally, a little bit further on in this segment.
Yes, we will.
All right, we're going to go ahead to Florida. It's not what you think. It's just, Florida, you start to laugh. Florida is leading the nation in COVID cases on a per capita basis again, and they are also the leading state with the UK B117 variant. We've got a news clip that will roll. We'll unpack it a little bit.
Florida leads the country in B117 variants, and local doctors are worried that spring breakers may be headed home with more than just souvenirs.
Yeah, I actually am a little surprised with how many people we're seeing this spring break.
It's certainly busier than last year. Orlando International Airport predicted a 45% increase in travel this spring break over last. Walt Disney World sold out for the week, and everyone seems to be hitting the beaches.
When I see these young adults shoulder to shoulder on the beaches, in the bars, without any social distancing, very few are wearing the mask, they will easily contract this variant and virus and take it back to their families and friends and their states. So this is my biggest concern.
The B117 strain originated in the UK. The latest data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention shows more than 4,600 cases of the B117 have now been identified in the US. But Dr. Khan believes the actual number may be even higher because variants are identified through random sampling. Florida is reporting the highest number at 738, followed by Michigan with 616 and California with 375. A stark contrast to states like Montana, Missouri, and Mississippi that have less than 10, and Arkansas is only 1.
It is 59 to 74% more contagious than any other variant and 30% deadlier than any other variant. By the end of this month or early next month, that can become the dominant variant in the entire country.
Doctors urge spring breakers to remember what you see on Florida beaches doesn't reflect the ongoing battle against coronavirus.
In the emergency room, people are definitely still concerned about getting COVID-19. You can't stop people. I wish they would just use a little bit more logic in creating some of their decisions.
Sonika Dange, WESH 2 News.
So one of the things that's coming out of Florida, actually several things, is over the weekend, we learned that in Miami Beach, they had to deploy riot police and SWAT teams to break up beach parties. Over 1,000 arrests, restaurants destroyed, wall-to-wall people to the point where you couldn't even move. and people not wearing masks. There were reports that the airlines were selling tickets from Philadelphia and New York City as cheap as $50 round trip. And the other thing is be mindful, although vaccination is going on across the country, in many states, some states are starting to tip over, and a growing number of states are tipping over. But in many states, people that are of younger age and going to spring break aren't vaccinated. And the other thing is that some of these variants, particularly the UK variant and the South African variant, the vaccinations that aren't Johnson & Johnson and not as effective on these new variants. The Johnson & Johnson one is interesting. It's more effective on the new variants and actually not as effective on the existing or more common strains we have right now. So it's a situation that is worth watching down there in Florida because, Jennifer, it begs the question, what happens is they all go home and they span out, especially in urban areas like New York City, which is opening back up and is densely populated.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a couple months ago, a friend of mine actually traveled to see some family in Florida, and they were like, it's like nothing's happening here. Which is particularly interesting because if you look at the video, that's exactly what it looks like. But you're right. The thing is, you're going to have a bunch of people travel for spring break to Florida because that's where everybody wants to be. And then they're going to come back. And a lot of these are, of course, like you mentioned, unvaccinated young people and further spread this virus and, potentially undo some of the gains that we've made recently.
And on the subject of undoing some of the gains, there are some in the medical universe that are a little worried when they look at the situation in some other parts of the world. And I know you have that story.
Yeah. So it appears that Europe is going into another lockdown, or at least parts of Europe, as they're facing this third wave of COVID, leading to newly imposed lockdowns. And I think we have a video kind of showing some of the resistance to that.
Yeah, Allison, I mean, it's looking like Groundhog Day in a lot of Europe. And, right now I'm actually in Tel Aviv, so I'm not there now. But as you know, I was reporting from Europe for most of the crisis, from Paris and Rome. Now, what we're seeing there is over the past weekend, new lockdowns, new regulations in Poland, Ukraine, and France. Now, in Ukraine, it's mostly in the Kiev area around the capital. In France, mostly in the north of the country, particularly around Paris. And in Poland, there are new restrictions throughout the country. What we're starting to see is this third wave, and it's really the impact of the slow rollout of that vaccine effort. It's been a scandal throughout the continent. So many people are complaining about the fact that Britain has really succeeded so far in vaccinating huge parts of its population. While in Europe, everything is lagging, even as new variants, specifically that British variant and others, are really running to the front line and taking over all of the other variants of the virus and spreading quite a bit quicker. And they're lagging behind with the vaccine. And these new regulations are inciting anger among the population. We've seen police deploying tear gas in places like Amsterdam, even in London and elsewhere in Germany. Now, Germany is a different case. Germany is also saying that because of a recent rise in new cases, that they may, and this is Angela Merkel talking, the Chancellor of Germany, they may have to tighten some restrictions. They sound as though they're going to be extending into April some of the current restrictions. All of this is a really bad sign, especially since, Allison, it really doesn't look like people are going to be abiding by this. The level of anger on the streets, the fact that a lot of these restrictions seem rather sort of ad hoc. They don't necessarily seem to be targeting all businesses the same. This is causing a lot of anger, and that's going to persist until that vaccine effort can get rolling, which brings me to why I am where I am right now. Tel Aviv. There's a glimpse of the future. This is one of the most successful vaccine rollouts in the world, and it's showing up in the numbers of new cases. And it really is back to normal here. A lot of people are walking around. I'm actually isolating right now in an Airbnb over downtown Tel Aviv. But the fact is that once this vaccine rollout gets going, things can get back to normal. That's exactly what's happening here. And that's exactly why the lack of a vaccine and that new surge in cases is such a scandal throughout Europe.
Hey, NBC.
Yeah, people aren't too happy about these lengthening restrictions. And while they're not impacting all countries, they are impacting a significant number in the EU. I mean, France in particular has reported 30,000 new cases per day recently. And Germany is already talking about extending its lockdown longer because their kind of parameters for what they consider pulling the emergency brake is basically 100 of every 100,000 people testing positive for coronavirus. But there's been a lot of criticism of the EU in regards to the vaccine rollout because the US and the UK were much quicker to order vaccines and then get the programs rolled out, which is, I mean, if you think about how poorly the US program was rolled out, that's pretty alarming. So there's been a significant amount of criticism over that, and people are just really not happy about, you know, the impending extensions of lockdowns and restrictions.
We have family in Israel, and what we're being told by our family in Israel is just what that report said. It is life as normal there. Over 50% of the population has been vaccinated, and they are rolling it out as fast as they can. On the flip side, Israel's treatment of Palestinians, in particular on the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip, is reprehensible, is the word that comes to mind. And I say that as a Jew.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
All right. I guess we're going to go ahead and move on to our next story, which I touched on, which is about the AstraZeneca vaccine. The AstraZeneca vaccine. Boy, that's a mouthful. It is kind of a tongue twister. AstraZeneca vaccine was initially tested and reported to be 79% effective. There's also been a number of questions in Europe, and now it turns out that maybe they didn't use all the data when they came up with that 79% number.
So breaking news this morning about AstraZeneca's COVID vaccine. Just a few hours ago, we learned that federal health officials are now questioning the results from a U.S. trial. They're saying the company may have used outdated information. Just yesterday, AstraZeneca reported its vaccine was 79% effective at preventing COVID-19. But the Data and Safety Monitoring Board says AstraZeneca may have provided an incomplete view of its U.S. clinical trial. The company has not commented on the board's new concerns. AstraZeneca was planning to apply to the Food and Drug Administration for emergency use next month.
And AstraZeneca has since commented that the vaccine is somewhere between 69% and 74% effective instead of the 79% effective. What does that mean? Generally, a vaccine that is 60% or effective or better is considered an effective vaccine. So it is in the range, even on the lowest end at 69% as effective. At the end of the day, Jennifer, I know what my view is. When my turn comes to get my COVID vaccine, and because I am a healthy male and not of an older age group, I'm at the back of the line. And because I believe that come March 31st, I think 5 million people in Washington will be eligible for vaccines. And that leaves out 1.2 million people. And hi, I'm one of those 1.2 million people. Jennifer, I would speculate you are also oh, wait a minute. I don't know if you are because you're an educator. That would be, what's that?
I'm technically still not eligible because I'm a college educator and we can teach remotely. So it's for, because we got a whole email about this the other day, and it's basically like K through 12 educators who they're pushing to return back to classrooms who are eligible for it first.
So there you go. We're at the back of the pile. Yeah. With that said, when it comes time, if my choice is AstraZeneca or nothing, I'm getting the AstraZeneca shot. Yeah. If I could pick, I would want the Johnson & Johnson shot because one shot versus two, heard the side effects aren't quite as bad, and it is showing to be more effective on the newer strains.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. It's just, it seems like such a fundamental time to be forthcoming with the data. And, you know, even though it's not significant drop, it's enough, that it should be, noted. So yeah, I guess we'll have to see how this pans out and its efficacy, moving forward as more of it's administered, I guess.
It doesn't help in building community trust for those who are not trusting the vaccines in the first place.
No, absolutely. People who are already skeptical of the efficacy of the vaccine and COVID more broadly are just going to find a way to, cherry pick from this and use it as a way to reinforce their own position.
It's amazing how they do stuff like that. Jennifer, I know you have another story.
So this is just a national update on COVID cases and death. I feel like I said that with far too much joy in my voice. This is very somber. So as of March 24th, today, 2021, the U.S. has more than 30 million COVID cases and more than 550,000 deaths. According to the CDC, nearly 130 million Americans have received at least one dose of the vaccine, so that's promising news. There were 54,000 cases reported across the nation on 3/23 and 1,215 deaths, with a 7-day average of cases being reported at 49,000 per day and just over 900 deaths per day. Washington State, in its own right, since the beginning of the pandemic, has reported nearly 360,000 coronavirus cases and over 5,000 deaths, with the most cases reported, of course, in King and Pierce County. And the 7-day average for cases as of 3/23, which was yesterday, is still 758 cases per day in Washington.
Yeah, and the numbers have started to creep up a little bit. Yes. There isn't enough data right now. And I used to spend a year ago was just crunching mad numbers on this, and we were reporting it on a daily basis. There's not enough data yet to go, okay, we have a 7 or 14-day trend of a line that's moving up, but I do know there is some concern expressed. The other thing we learned today, 46 inmates in the King County Jail have tested positive for COVID. Another thing that I read, which is more on the national front, 84% of ICE detention centers have active COVID cases in them right now.
Yeah, that's troubling. And so I think people are starting to get, as we start to get more people vaccinated and we start phasing into new things and things are open, people are starting to, I feel like, think too much that we're on the other side of this pandemic, and we still have a long way to go.
So Sarah Hester Ross, who on TikTok does this thing, Florida Man Friday and Florida Woman Wednesday, she is a piano bar musician, and she did a TikTok where she is just giving an update on her general life situation, and the piano bars are reopening in Las Vegas. They're not doing the dueling piano thing because people really aren't supposed to be dancing or singing along. So she is working solo and just operating like as her own comedy act. And she reported that over 90% of the people were wearing masks, not dancing, being cooperative, and not bitching about having to take basic measures. And we saw in JAMA, the report that we reported on about 3 weeks ago, that almost 90% of Americans now are saying they're wearing a mask at least at some points. So mask compliance has really, when you get to 90% in something, those last 10%, you're kind of getting into what I call, I'm not going to throw because people will freak out and it'll be taken the wrong way. It's going to be really hard to move the needle with that 10% no matter what.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I still think it's, appropriate for people to be cautious and not get too enthusiastic about the reopening of places and thinking that life has basically, we're on the other side of this and life has returned to normal, because we still have, like I said, we're a long ways away from herd immunity and things fully opening back up. So it's best to still kind of keep taking precautions so that we can move forward and eventually get there.
And on the subject of moving forward, getting there and returning to normal, Washington State moved to phase 3 on Monday.
It's been a roller coaster of a year at places like Beach's Restaurant in Vancouver.
Different every day. We're definitely excited to hopefully start to get back to somewhat normal.
They may need to add a few more logs on the pizza oven fire. 50% capacity here means 150 diners at a time can be inside.
I mean, it's exciting. It's still definitely not where we want to be, but we got to add a lot more tables. We can have parties of up to 10 people now instead of 6. So I know that makes people happy and us happy because we don't like having to split everybody up.
Monday's lunch customers moved in at a gentle pace. Nancy Zeman and Donna Diggs were there to celebrate Donna's birthday. The two women have a slightly different feel for indoor dining.
It's good to get back in a restaurant, but I have to say I did have some hesitation. But I recently got fully vaccinated, so now I feel a little better about it.
I'm totally comfortable. I have been for a long time, and I think it's been a long time coming.
At this CrossFit gym in Hazeldale, James Nivatalo is setting up for afternoon classes. He says more capacity could mean more memberships.
It's going to help to have more capacity, and we're looking forward to this whole thing going away.
As it is, they have plenty of space to work out safely. For them, phase 3 may be more about changing attitudes.
Hopefully, the confidence will come from the community that they want to get back to gyms and not just hibernate at home anymore. So that's what we're hoping.
To remain in phase 3, counties must keep their new COVID case numbers and hospitalizations down. Clark County is well below the marks, but new cases have plateaued. Public Health Officer Alan Melnick says there is still plenty of virus in the community.
I want people to avoid gatherings of folks from outside their household where the masks stop being worn and the physical distancing isn't followed.
Dr. Melnick has more concerns about gathering at homes than in restaurants, where tables are laid out for safety. Donna Diggs is glad to support by dining out.
And people need to get back to work and be able to take care of themselves. I think we can have a balance of being careful, but still opening up. I think we're ready.
Tim Gordon, KGW News.
I will say, Dr. Mrs. Malcontent and I have gone and eaten in a restaurant. We've eaten indoors in a restaurant. They took very strong measures. There was hardly anybody in the place, and everything was gapped out. And we didn't go at prime time. So in other words, we didn't go like at noon. We didn't go at 6:30 at night. We kind of went at an oddball time when the place was pretty empty. Waiter wore masks. We kept our masks on, of course, when we were eating and drinking. But Jennifer, I will say, like, we went to seat it, I looked up, make sure there wasn't an inlet or out vent blowing right over our heads. Never used the bathroom. Used the bottle of hand sanitizer that was in there. Dr. Mrs. Malcontent, by default as a doctor, is fully vaccinated, and I'm still waiting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think there's, like I said, I live right near University Village, which is, even before we moved to phase 3, was always very, very busy. Now it's just insane. So I think there's a lot of people that are super thrilled that we have, more options of things we can do and aren't spending so much time at home. I have not yet taken my kids and gone and eaten in a restaurant. I've done some DoorDash. I'm not going to lie, I probably DoorDash way more than I should. But I'm also really busy, so I'm going to justify it with that. But yeah, it definitely feels like people are enthusiastic about this moving to phase 3.
We've definitely done more delivery than we should. And actually, we've probably been really bad in about the last 8 weeks. It's starting to show in the face. I really need to start hitting the pavement again because I'm bigger than this time last year. That is for sure. All right, Jennifer, I think you have how one town is taking a novel approach to deal with COVID business slowdowns.
Yeah, so Redmond, Washington is doing this thing called Vaxications, where they're offering to pay people to come and stay in their town and do some, businesses and, kind of like help out small businesses where in Redmond, much like much of the United States, small businesses have really suffered as a result of COVID. Do we have a clip for this, David? I can't remember.
No, we don't have a video clip on this one.
Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and go on.
Yep.
So according to the Seattle Times, the city of Redmond is implementing this plan they call Geek for Gold. And so if you've been vaccinated and looking for a low-key travel destination, or if you're just kind of tired quarantining in the same space, if you book a hotel, if you're one of 500 people that book a hotel for 2 nights in the city of Redmond, they will give you 100 virtual kind of like e-gift certificates to use at various places in the city of Redmond. If you can't do 2 nights and you can only do 1, you still get $25 in these e-gift certificates to use in businesses within the city. And this kind of follows on the heels of other states like Colorado, who had some success doing similar programs without the kind of hotels. And even Edmonds had Edmonds for like Edmonds Cash, or let me look up the name. Oh yeah, Edmonds Cash. And other cities in Western Washington are actually doing or thinking about implementing similar programs. The difference with Edmonds Cash, it was kind of done at the same time as the one in Colorado that went viral. But they're really like, wow, that's a great idea to kind of attach it to the hotel, because then you're getting people to come stay. You're giving them these virtual certificates, and they are putting $100 back into the economy.
I would like actually to give a shout out to Edmonds. Dr. and Mrs. Malcontent and I went there like end of November or early December. It was a sunny day. It was on a colder day, but not intolerable. Yeah. And they had the tents and the way that they were all open, and they had closed down all of the streets, and all of the restaurants had like full outdoor seating. And we felt really, and again, Dr. and Mrs. Malcontent's a doctor who deals with COVID patients, said she was like, this is actually pretty good because of the way that they had set up everything. Edmonds, of what I understand, is not planning to reopen those downtown core streets. They are planning to just keep that open air because it has been such a success for them as a community.
Yeah, so if you're looking for something to do and it hasn't already filled up yet, book a couple nights in Redmond, get $100 to spend, go have some fun if you're vaccinated, or if you just want out of your apartment or away from your children. I'm not saying I love my children.
And I'm going to put a shameless plug for a restaurant. However, I don't know if that restaurant is in that $100 virtual bucks. But even if you're just in your hotel room, like, fine, I'm going to do my hotel room and I'm just going to use this money for takeout. Yeah. The name of the restaurant is Noodle Land, and you're going to think it's a noodle place. The first time I ever walked in, I was like, oh, cool, a ramen place. No, it's not. It is a Thai restaurant, and I know that's a really bizarro name for a Thai restaurant. My mouth is literally watering just talking about this place. It is so authentic. The portions are huge, and it's just amazeballs. So big plug for Noodle Land over by Redmond. They're not in Redmond Town Center. They're right on the edge.
Awesome. Thai food is the best. It's like one of the things I order a lot because it's easy to make vegan.
Yes. And they would be accommodating there if you ever get to the east side.
Okay. Good to know.
But they won't deliver it to you in Seattle. We're going to do a little pause for the cause, and then we've got 2 more stories.
Black Coffee is a hub for communities and a hub for meeting people, making friends, and understanding.
What Black Coffee is to me is a place to actually call home, a place where Black youth will feel welcomed, where Black families will come and feel like they're at home.
What we're trying to build is more than just coffee. Community is something that we do naturally. We know who's in the community, we know what the deficits are, and we're trying to fix that. We want to bring people together.
My hope is that the phrase grounded in excellence shows up everywhere and that it becomes a movement.
I'm looking forward to hanging out at Black Coffee with my friends and feeling safe.
Black Coffee to me means opportunity for people like me and my other friends and family to come here and do homework safely and hang out and stuff like that.
That is happening. It is happening.
Black Coffee is located in Shoreline, Washington on Highway 99 between 170th and 180th. They're on the west side of the highway. I always tell people because their hours are a little variable, so make sure you check your Facebook page or their website before you go up to Shoreline. Amazing coffee, amazing merch, great COVID protocols. And oh my God, the potato scones. Imagine if a warm, fluffy scone and a baked potato with cheese and onions and chives had a baby, and that's what it is. They are so good. And Jennifer, you can probably tell, I haven't had dinner yet tonight.
Yeah, I know. And it always makes me a little bit jealous because I can't eat those scones, and you talk about how wonderful they are like every show.
I know we're getting ready to wrap up. We have 2 more stories left, but I just hit the spam those hearts button. Go ahead and spam those hearts one more time. Let those mods and admins know that you appreciate the work that you do. Let Renee know that you appreciate the work that she does for us. Let our research team know that you appreciate the work that they do, and our social media manager, who is crushing it on telling us on what to do and when to do it and on the channels we're on. We love you, Sarah. We wouldn't be on TikTok if it wasn't for you, and we're kicking butt over there. Thank you very much. Next story takes us to Seattle. And on the subject of TikTok, I saw this video on TikTok a couple of days ago, and I was wondering, what office is this? Where is this? And I has since been, by internet sleuths, not on our team, identified that the office in question where this was filmed is Zillow, and there is speculation that this is a Zillow employee that is narrating this. I'm going to go ahead and roll the clip, and then I'm going to talk for a few minutes about the problems and challenges that Seattle is facing because of COVID.
There it is. Beautiful downtown Seattle. See the Space Needle right ahead of you there. It's gorgeous. If you're up this high, you can't see the homeless people. But then as I turn around inside this high-rise, it's like a zombie apocalypse movie. Desk after desk after desk. Empty. People used to be working in here. This whole building was bustling, full of people. This whole building just empty. Because our governor, our mayor, and our president has passed all these fucking laws, and they've done nothing to help this town. It's crazy. It's the eeriest feeling walking through this building. I used to wait in line to get the elevators. Now it's just empty all the way around. Not a soul in the building. It's wild.
Jennifer, I put this up. It's over our heads right now, which is Zillow's stock chart. 52 weeks ago, Zillow was $28 and change. Zillow has been, in the last 52 weeks, at the end of the year, was 7 times higher than where it was 52 weeks ago. It is 5 times higher today because it took a little bit of a beating on the stock market in particular today. I did look in after hours. It's about halfway to gaining back what it lost today. Zillow has a market cap of $31.1 billion, so it's trading at a PE of just 11, which means it's actually a value stock. Now, he goes on about there's nobody here, and this is the president's fault, and the governor's fault, and the mayor's fault. Zillow's doing great. And not only is Zillow doing great, but Jennifer, as you know, there are a lot of companies that are really thinking about not returning to an office environment or scaling it way back, because what they've learned in the last year is they don't need to have people in offices to be productive.
Yeah, no, exactly. Feels a lot like this person was pushing his political opinions on this particular situation, cherry picking some data, trying to, just kind of formulate this particular narrative that fit within his own beliefs and his own political leanings.
Well, that's exactly it. And let's not forget who was president up to about 63 days ago. And some people would tell you, Jennifer, he still is president.
Yeah, although I think March 4th has come and gone by a while.
Well, they've moved the goalposts. It's end of April. That's the new one. End of April.
Oh, yeah. So I'm just going to start doing that now. Every time something doesn't happen that I want to happen, I'm just going to start moving the goalposts. It'll be fine.
You have to trust the plan. I want to talk about what the real problems are that Seattle is facing. We have reported to the point that probably people are tired of me talking about it. Between public and private investment for more than 5 years, the city of Seattle has spent $1 billion with a B on addressing the unhomed issue. There are approximately 12,000 people that are unhomed from the last homeless census that they did in Seattle. That comes out to about $83,000 per unhomed person. We have run the math, and I'm going to spare my soapbox again on how at $83,000 a person, there should not be a single unhomed person in Seattle. So the first thing that you have is this tremendous amount of waste that is going on. And you have government waste and you have waste within the nonprofit community. Now, I know some people are going to start roasting me in the comments. I work for a nonprofit. I'm not saying all nonprofits are bad. But if you work in the nonprofit community, you know some nonprofits are really bad. And what Seattle provides, and we had this feedback from the police, from CHUDs, from people in mutual aid, and from far left homeless advocates. They all said the same thing. Everything's just a temporary solution. Nobody is interested in providing a permanent solution, because a permanent solution then means that the people providing the temporary solutions don't have money anymore because the problem has been solved. Although on paper, you never fully solve the problem. If you create an efficient system, you are catching people before they fall through the net and lifting them back up into a home situation. We'll save that conversation for another day. Why is downtown Seattle the way it is? It's the way it is for a number of reasons. We talked about this a moment ago. Reason number one, there's this thing called COVID going on, and everybody went home and is working out of home offices. President Biden didn't make any declaration, Jennifer, that people have to work from home. He hasn't made any declaration as such. He has no power to at a federal level. Really, the only thing that he's done from an executive action standpoint was use the Defense Production Act to get COVID vaccine production out of the ditch as it was in, mandate that people need to wear masks if they're on public transportation or in federal government buildings or federal property, because he has oversight in those areas, and requested that everybody mask up for 100 days, of which, as we've already covered, almost 90% of America is at least complying with. That's it.
Yeah.
Jay Inslee has opened things back up. Zillow could put people in that office tomorrow. They could have 400 people on that floor tomorrow under phase 3 rules.
Yeah, they could. And apparently this particular person just, again, is cherry picking data to fit their own particular agenda or mindset, and not really thinking critically about, you know, the logistics of this, or the things that could be done, or the things that have transpired over the past 63 days, or even the things that transpired in the, year before that, we were almost a year before that, we were in the midst of the COVID pandemic and what that did. So again, this person just, you know, isn't really going to change their perspective, because any kind of reformulation of the narrative that takes into consideration the things you just talked about doesn't fit within their own particular agenda.
That's 100% correct. And the other thing, Jennifer, is that the city of Seattle, there is blame on the city of Seattle's feet, but not for the reason that he's saying. City of Seattle engineered large areas of downtown, and they permitted and allowed companies like Amazon to make South Lake Union an empty core. Fills up with office workers during the day, almost no housing in those areas at night, so that nobody is down there. Then they made parking extremely difficult, so that people that didn't live in the city didn't want to drive down there. And absent, say, a train that could take people from the east side to the downtown that ran at a regular interval, like, say, on the East Coast subway systems for 20 or 21 hours a day, you're still not going to get people to sign up and go for nightlife. So when all of those office workers left, all of the businesses that depended on those office workers lost their clientele. And that's why businesses left downtown. The unhomed moved into downtown after the businesses left. And ironically, Jennifer, as you know, after they did sweeps in places like Cal Anderson Park, in Miller Field, and Denny Park, because where else are they going to go? Because we don't solve the unhomed problem here. We just play whack-a-mole and move them to different areas. And it plays into the narrative for certain people in the city of Seattle to enable the unhomed to sit in downtown.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I think of this too. This isn't an isolated historical incident. If you look back to the 40s, 50s, and 60s in the Georgetown area, which used to be very suburban, like, you know, had a lot of houses and businesses. Once Boeing moved in, it basically just kind of took over and industrialized the area. And now we have kind of like, there's a revival of Georgetown, I guess, in a way. And it's more like a place, I don't know, middle-aged white women go to the bars there when they want to feel like they're on the wrong side of the tracks. I don't know. But it's, yeah, very much a very different version of itself than it was 50, 60 years ago.
Exactly. And what corporate America has figured out is that to a degree, they can exploit, and I say exploit with a grain of salt, but they can exploit white-collar workers because they don't have to provide them an office. And they're not paying for those workers to have high-speed internet into their house. Yeah. They don't have to pay for heating. They don't have to pay for water. They don't have to pay for a cleaning crew. They don't have to pay property insurance. They don't have to do any of that. They don't even have to pay for a laptop. They can just go to a bring-your-own-device model, provide you the option to get a company laptop if that's what you want to do. And some workers in that space are okay with it, because they just want the home office deduction.
Yeah. So it's definitely not something that's not beneficial for these big corporations when they get to do things like this and, you know, save money and pinch pennies in these particular areas where they would have been otherwise shelling out significant amounts of money to keep high-speed internet, heating, cooling, all of these things that are necessary to run an office and keep it functioning, especially with that many people.
Yes. And it's not going to come back. And that's the challenge that Seattle is going to have to figure out. Yeah. Because I was talking to someone else today, and what I said is, even if Amazon next week were to say, well, it won't be next week. Let's say we get to phase 4, because phase 4 is basically life is back to normal. And Amazon says, okay, phase 4, all you morons, your asses are coming back into the office in 3 weeks. You got 3 weeks notice. It's not happening. Because there's going to be people that are going to go, not only are they going to go, no way am I coming back in because I've worked at home for more than a year. And you know what? I don't want the commute. I don't want the parking. I don't want to have to sit in an open office with all of the distractions that are going on around me. And if you're not going to accommodate that, there's a company out there that supports remote work that is going to accommodate me for it. The office is dead in this country. The large office is dead, and people need to figure that out.
Who the hell wants to go back? I don't know about any of you, and I don't want to have to go back to wearing like makeup and, you know, nice clothes 5 days a week when I have to go into my office. I'd much rather like put on a nice top and wear my sweats and Uggs for a Zoom meeting because they can only see it from the top up, rather than like have to spend all that time getting ready to go into an office and deal with like, the commute, the paying for parking, the finding lunch, you know, having to deal with other people, which isn't always my favorite thing. So there's lots of benefits for people to continue to stay home and work, both for them and for the corporations.
I will freely confess, I have done Zoom meetings with the shirt and the coat on top, and I am literally standing in my underwear or sitting in my underwear. And I'm just making really sure before I get on the air that my secret is not going to be given away by the framing that I have. I assure you right now, everyone, I am wearing pants and underwear.
Good to know. Good to know, David.
All right, Jennifer, you have one last story, COVID related, and this one is bizarro. And we have some humor attached to it.
It happens in West Texas on Monday, and this man basically runs down and tries to run off the road this National Guard convoy carrying COVID vaccines in West Texas. So he was identified as 66-year-old Larry Lee Harris of Arizona. And so what he did is he tried to run them off the road 3 times. And when he couldn't get that done, he basically just turned his truck in front of the convoy and had them stop, pulled his .45 out of his pocket, told them he was a detective, pulled 11 guardsmen out of the van so he could search them. And then authorities finally come and they arrest him without incident. And they basically, they're like, seems very mentally disturbed, but he was convinced he was stopping the kidnapping of a woman and child. Again, this is a 66-year-old Arizona man, Larry Lee Harris, who basically tried to run a National Guard convoy carrying COVID vaccines off the road because he thought he was a detective interrupting a kidnapping.
We have a clip.
Yeah.
It is 6:15 and time for your morning rush. Stories we are tracking for you. Likely you'll see on your media feeds today. Starting with this here, a bizarre incident. This is out of West Texas involving the COVID-19 vaccine. So this is a bizarre incident here. A man was arrested for trying to run, 3 National Guard vans off the road, then holding the guardsmen at gunpoint. So they were transporting COVID-19 vaccines. Police say the suspect, Larry Harris, followed the convoy from a gas station after he believed that there were kidnapped people inside that convoy.
Jennifer, I think I've seen him before.
I know, and I didn't really pay that much attention to it until you said something before the show, and then you put it up there, and I was like, oh, damn, he does.
It can't be unseen, but I'm pretty sure we've seen this guy before.
Saddam.
Yeah.
Did you miss me, Buttercup?
Yes.
No, it can't be. You're dead. I killed you.
Yeah, you killed me. So, where was I gonna go? Detroit?
Cannot be unseen. I mean, It's like the U.S. military. Look, you want a Q conspiracy? Forget there was a convoy of, Save the Children, vaccine, National Guard, blah, blah, blah. Saddam Hussein has been alive and well in Arizona, apparently, and his death was faked by the United States of America. You heard it here first on Malcontent News.
David, do not put that into the universe. Come on.
He even has the stare.
I know.
We have to end it on a light note. It wasn't a heavy show, but I saw in the comments that people were asking, like, how did he know? They had stopped at a gas station prior. He had saw them at a gas station, and I would presume it's a convoy. They needed gas, or they needed a pee break, or they needed to drink some blood to get strength for their Q conspiracy.
Yes. That's what I do at gas stations. Drink blood.
You just have to give them the secret code.
Yes.
George Soros taught us it, but we can't share it with you. I've already said too much.
There's a handshake too, so.
But yes, and the little pin you have to wear.
Yes. Yes.
Jennifer, amazing show tonight.
Yes, it was.
One more time, everybody, spam those hearts. Spam those hearts for Renee and the incredible work that she did on that interview. It was absolutely fantastic.
Yes,
Rashi will be slicing and dicing this show up for us. And so the interview will be available for just unique replay on its own. So you'll be able to share that. That'll be on Twitch and YouTube. Full stop. It probably won't be tomorrow, because we're covering the protests. So I probably won't be able to take it to the last mile until Friday. We are going to be live tomorrow. So somewhere between 6 and 7 o'clock for the 300 days of protest in Seattle. We will be covering that live. The other thing is, don't forget, Unite Seattle Magazine, their interview with Dr. Fauci will be available in shelves, including at QFC. Can't believe I'm plugging a Kroger company. Ugh. But it's in proxy of plugging a great partner of us that work with us to share this content. Mike Montgomery, thank you so much for your allyship in this. The other thing is we will be cutting parts of this interview up, and we'll be sharing it on our TikTok channel, because we have joint exclusive coverage with Mike Montgomery and Unite Seattle. And Dr. Fauci said some really amazing things that I actually haven't heard, Jennifer, in other interviews.
Yeah, me either. It was a fantastic interview, and kudos again to Renee. It was a wonderfully done interview.
Jennifer, thank you so much. I
Yes.
will try to avoid pepper balls and pepper spray and whatever else may fly tomorrow. Although I will say, the last few months I've been kind of like had this lucky charm over my head. I know I should say it out loud.
And don't forget your Soros pin and the handshake, just in case.
Oh,
you
I
get
will
hung.
not, because if I get tired, I'm a little tired as it is now. So I'm going to go find a 4-year-old in the basement for a snack.
Good.
How do people believe this stuff? I don't understand.
No idea.
Oh my goodness.
Hallelujah! Holy shit! Where's the Tylenol?
All right, Jennifer, and on that note, have a good night.
You too. Bye, everybody.
Malcontent News is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with 3 key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events live as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent.
You fit the profile. You're the malcontent.
Nobody wants to hear the nonsensical ravings of a loudmouth malcontent.
Fuck you! You are the biggest hypocrite on the face of the planet.
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say.